What's poppin' and welcome back to Maxify Film, where today I'm excited to be premiering the newest genre of segment of Maxify Film, that is Maxify Theory. So, what is Maxify Theory? Well, in this segment I hope to dive into more of the conceptual or theoretical side of not only filmmaking, but of film as a medium for art, medium for entertainment, whatever. So, I know that sounds very daunting. Theoretics of film theory, that does sound daunting, and trust me, it definitely can be. But today I am going to try to make it a lot less daunting by relating it to a topic which we are all familiar with, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, in doing this, I hope to do two things. One, kind of clarify one of the most fundamental concepts of film theory by relating it to a more contemporary example. So, hopefully give you a better understanding of this idea I'm going to be talking about today. And two, study the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a unique cultural object. So speaking of cultural object, today what we are going to be talking about is Roland Barthes' idea of the myth. So the study of film, and really the study of all media, is based largely in semiotics, which is the study of signs and how stuff in society conveys its meaning to us. And so Roland Barthes was a French literary critic and cultural analyst who kind of revolutionized the way we look at semiotics by giving us the idea of what he calls the myth. So he puts the myth into this diagram. So what are we looking at here? So the way Barthes explains it is that the myth, which is basically what this diagram is going to represent once I fill it in, is made up of two semiotic systems. And so don't get too worried about the terminology of everything I'm about to go through, because you're going to understand it more as I go through. I have an example, and then as I explain how this relates to Marvel, it is going to kind of clear itself up. So don't worry too much about this. If you are one of my fellow students of film theory, this will be kind of a review, but it might be good anyways before going into my analysis of Marvel. But don't worry too much if you're not familiar with this, because it's going to kind of speak for itself in a way. So there are two systems at play here. This system, and then this larger system. So this first system is what Barthes calls language. So this is made up of signifier, signified, which create a sign. And so that's basically how a semiotic system works. So this later will be a signifier and a signified and a sign itself. But starting out, the language starts with the first signifier. So what is the first signifier? So in any language, the first signifier is going to be like the actual thing that is conveying whatever it is you're conveying. So the actual medium, the form of the language. So for the language of photography, for example, this would be a photograph, a celluloid depiction of light, or a digital depiction of light, depending on what type of photography. But this is going to be basically just the form of whatever particular language we're looking at. So for an example of photography example, which is one example that Barthes uses a lot, this is going to be just the photo. Doesn't matter what's in the photo, it's just the photo itself as a means to signify. And then you have your signified. So this is going to be everything that is in the photo. What does this represent? What meaning is in this? So take a photograph of some pasta, for example. This is an example that Barthes uses extensively and probably one of his most digestible examples. So the signifier is, it's a photo. The signified is pasta. There's pasta, there's a net bag, there is fresh fruit, fresh produce. So these culminate into the first sign, which is the culmination of these two. A photograph of pasta and produce and a mesh bag. So this is pretty much the basic part of it, is what does this language, how does this language make meaning, and what is that meaning, and then culminates in the full language. So photo of fruit, a photo of fruit, a photo of pasta. So then we come to the second system. So this, along with being the first sign, is also the second signifier. So the second signifier is going to be this sign. We're starting this time with a photo of pasta. And then your second signified is going to be whatever deeper cultural meanings that this sign, this new signifier now, is kind of pushing towards the viewer. So in the example of an advertisement for pasta, it might be like naturalness, home cookedness, and above all, what Barthes says about this particular image is it has an Italianness about it. And so these are the deeper meanings, and so this second system here, the second one I circled, this is the system of myth. So we get to the third sign, or the second sign rather, in the second system, the culmination of this completed language and its more conceptual things that it's conveying on its audience, and that culminates in the final sign, which is essentially the myth. So for the pasta example, the myth is that by buying this pasta, you also receive Italianicity. So it's the culmination of these two. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted of an explanation. It is not exactly the easiest system, but I think that was a good enough example to get on to my next point. So how does a Marvel movie fit into this diagram? Now that's the question that I want to explore today, because this all of a sudden clicked with me while I was actually watching Shang-Chi in theaters a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, wow, okay, this is actually quite simple. So first things first, let's establish what the first signifier of a Marvel movie is. So we're now relating this to the MCU. So what is the first signifier? Well, first let's figure out what the language is of a Marvel movie. So the language is going to be film, a movie. Meaning the first signifier is going to be film, as the most basic way you could possibly imagine it. So video, images moving in rapid succession to create motion. So motion picture. Then you have the signified. So this is going to depend on what specific movie you're looking at, but this is all the stuff that makes whatever your motion picture is into what it will kind of come out as. So this is going to be all the specific elements of the film, so plot and story, characters, cinematography, anything that makes this basic motion picture into a distinct product of all of its efforts to become its own thing. Those are going to be the signifieds. So this culminates in the sign, which is any specific Marvel movie. So, take for example Black Panther. So, Black Panther, first of all, is a motion picture. And then you get your plot and your characters and your cinematography, all unique, a plot about kind of corruption in family, and you have your characters, you have T'Challa, you have Killmonger, you have all these unique characters, this unique plot and story and themes, and you have unique cinematography, especially in Black Panther is a good example of unique cinematography within the MCU. And this all culminates in the finalized version of Black Panther, complete with its unique story, its unique themes, and unique everything. So, then we finish basically the language. We are at Black Panther. So now we enter the second signified, which is where this movie is going to become part of the larger myth, which in this case is going to be the MCU. So, what are the signifieds here? Well, the signifieds here are pretty much all those ideas that are kind of standardized over MCU movies. So, very common themes of family and belonging. Every single one sets up the next movie. They're all very similarly structured, and I think maybe one of the most obvious ones is their use of humor and perhaps overuse of bathos style humor. And so note that these signifieds, maybe the things that the studio mandates are put into each movie, are all of the commonalities of MCU movies. Each of them has these themes, and interestingly, these are most of the common critiques of the MCU and its films. So these are all of the things that are kind of put on as a secondary meaning once it enters the field of the myth, which here is Marvelicity, or like MCU-ness. It being part of this greater universe, which is another part of this, makes it into a Marvel movie. It gives it this Marvelicity. So you have your film, your specific film, whatever it is, Black Panther. You have all of these things that kind of make it into what we think of as a Marvel movie. So these common themes, this idea of always setting up the next movie, this common kind of standardized humor of all characters, and the idea of similar structure with some exceptions. This all culminates in these movies becoming the myth that is Marvelicity. So, what does this mean? What are the implications of all of this? Well, one of the first things to note is one of Barthes' biggest ideas is that when you go from this first sign of just a specific Marvel movie, in this case, to the myth, because you're getting these new concepts and new signified over the top of the old signified, it kind of strips the value of these. As Barthes says, it strips the history from the original sign so that it can make room to put these. And so, circling back to the pasta advertisement, the history of maybe the specific tomatoes and the specific mesh bag in that shot, which is the Paisani advertisement, those lose their specific history. Wherever those came from and whatever they are, they don't matter anymore. So now all that matters is the second signified of this is natural, this is homemade, this is Italian. So here in Marvel, we kind of tend, at least how I've seen it, with the people I've seen looking at Marvel movies, especially people who kind of look down on MCU movies, is they kind of do strip this away to focus more on this. And I think that's something that happens when the Marvel movie becomes part of the myth of Marvelicity in our society. So I think that now understanding this diagram and understanding how the MCU kind of acts as a myth, we can kind of rethink the way we view these films, taking them more as movies than as myth. And I think that's very valuable, because when you view these films as just a part of this larger universe, as part of this standardized system, they lose a lot of their value. So by viewing them for their uniquities, for what they have that's unique to them, their special and unique values, and the things that make those movies, not what make those movies part of Marvel, then we can appreciate those films a lot more. And so I hope that this kind of analysis has helped you to get a kind of renewed perspective on the MCU and its films. And I hope that you can see these movies now as more than part of the myth, but as movies in themselves. So I hope that this helps you view the MCU in a different light, in hopefully a more positive light. And I hope that if you are indeed one of my fellow students of film theory, that this helped you get a better example, maybe a more contemporary example of Barthes Myth, and helped you maybe understand it a little more. It has definitely helped me understand it a little more, and it has helped me understand what the MCU's role is as a cultural item, and I think that's very valuable. I hope you can go out and do that. Maybe go out and see Shang-Chi and take this mindset with you. Anyways, thank you as always for watching, and do make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the fun new film stuff coming very soon. And do keep in mind with this analysis I just did, I am not Roland Barthes. I am not by any means a master semiotician or a master film theorist or analyst. So take everything here with a bit of a grain of salt, but above all, I just hope you understood what I was trying to say with this whole thing. It may not have been the purest example of Barthes Myth, but I hope that you got the idea of the MCU being this kind of myth that contains Marvel movies. So, I've been Max, this has been Maxify Film Theory, and I'll see you in the next one.